So, it's been just 13 days since the US-Iran conflict kicked off, and if you're feeling confused, you are not alone. The official story is, well, it's a mess, and it's left pretty much everyone asking one simple question. What is actually happening? So in this explainer, we're going to try and unpack this very, very strange state of affairs.
It really all starts right here, with this statement from President Trump. It seems pretty clear, right? A decisive declaration of victory. We won, case closed. Even said, in the first hour, it was over. Sounds like a swift and total win. But the reality on the ground seems to be telling a very different story.
And that's the central puzzle we're looking at. Even as the White House is saying the word won, the fighting is still going on, the number of injured American troops is actually climbing, and Iran's new leadership is promising to get revenge. So how can a war be both over and still raging at the exact same time?
To try and make sense of this, some analysts have started using this fascinating term, Schrödinger's conflict. It's their attempts to put a name on this bizarre situation, where the war seems to exist in two contradictory states at the same time. Let's break down what that actually means.
And this, right here, perfectly captures the mixed messages we're getting. On the one hand, you have the president saying victory was basically instant. But on the other hand, his own energy secretary is framing this as a prolonged fight, something that's going to take weeks. These aren't just slightly different takes. They are fundamentally different descriptions of what's happening.
So here's the key idea. A Schrödinger's conflict is where victory is declared but the military operations just don't stop. The U.S. has apparently won, but the administration is also saying there are still more targets to hit and the mission isn't over. It's a total paradox, and it's playing out in real time.
And then you've got the other side of this. Iran is definitely not acting like they've been defeated. Their new supreme leader, who, by the way, was injured in the same airstrike that killed several of his family members, he has vowed to keep fighting. He's specifically threatening to use the Strait of Hormuz to put pressure on the U.S.
Okay, so let's move on from the confusing words and talk about the consequences. Because this quote-unquote won war has very real and very high costs. And we're not talking about abstract numbers here. These are tangible impacts that are adding up every single day, both overseas and right here at home.
You know, in the very first hours of the conflict, a U.S. military investigation found that an American airstrike hit an elementary school. It was based on outdated intelligence. 165 people were killed, and most of them were children. It's just a devastating human toll from a single tragic mistake.
And the cost is being paid by American service members too. In less than 2 weeks, more than 150 U.S. troops have been injured. A number like that really challenges the whole story of a quick, clean, and finished operation.
The economic impact is also hitting hard. The price of oil has shot past $100 a barrel, and you are probably feeling it at the pump. Right now, the national average for a gallon of gas is $3.60. That's a jump of 66 cents in just the last 4 weeks.
And as you might expect, that pain at the pump is turning into political pressure. A new poll from Morning Consult shows that almost half of Americans, 48% to be exact, are blaming the high gas prices squarely on the Trump administration. Which brings us to maybe the most fundamental question of all, one that reporters and lawmakers just keep asking. Why are we even in Iran? What is the goal here? Because honestly, depending on who you ask, and even what day you ask them, you get a completely different answer.
So, what is the objective? Well, it seems to be constantly changing. At first, we heard a lot of talk about regime change, putting a new, more West-friendly leader in charge. Then the focus seemed to shift to just wiping out Iran's military capacity. And now, most recently, the president is really emphasizing one thing: preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons.
And here's where it gets even more confusing. While the president is publicly focusing on Iran's nuclear program, some lawmakers say that's not what they're hearing behind closed doors. They've had military briefings, and they report that top officials have not identified the nuclear issue as the main goal of this whole operation.
So with no clear goal, it's really no surprise that experts are openly questioning what the administration's endgame is. I mean, if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, how do you know when you're done? How do you find what one former ambassador called an off-ramp?
Peter Baker of the New York Times put it pretty bluntly. The perception is that there just wasn't a plan from the beginning. It looks like the administration is just improvising, trying to build a strategy 13 days after the conflict started, which leaves them with, as he says, not very good options.
Tom Nichols at The Atlantic has this really compelling theory about the shifting goals. He thinks the administration is reverse engineering its war aims. The idea is, since that big, grand goal of regime change didn't happen, they're now just pointing to smaller things they've already done, like sinking ships or destroying missile sites, and saying that was the mission all along. It's a way to declare mission accomplished by just redefining the mission itself.
And so that's where we're left, with a conflict that's defined by contradiction. A war that's been won but isn't over. A mission with shifting goals, rising costs, and absolutely no clear endgame in sight. And it all leads us to this final critical question. When a war exists in two states at once, how do you ever find the exit?